Mr. Kirby, thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
It's a critical time in history. It's disgusting and frightening to see these videos of innocent Palestinians and Israelis being massacred. How much more violent do you think the situation is going to get?
Difficult to know. I mean, it is an active military operation that Israel is conducting against Hamas, active including today. And unfortunately, in a time of war, you can't perfectly predict that there won't be additional casualties, even amongst innocent civilians. And that's sad, but it is an honest truth. And I think we all need to steel ourselves and prepare ourselves for the possibility that more innocent life will be lost. And I think it's also important to remember why that started, how that started, and that was Hamas. Paragliding into a music festival in Israel, shooting innocent people that were just there to listen to some music. And they're putting the Palestinians in Gaza at greater risk. They're headquartering themselves in hospitals and schools and residential buildings, basically using the Palestinian people as human shields.
What do you tell those Palestinians that are stuck in a crossfire?
We know that you are not Hamas. Right. We know that you didn't ask for this. You didn't invite Hamas in to do this sort of a barbaric series of attacks. And we are working hard with Israelis and with Egyptians to see if we can find a corridor, a safe passage corridor for you if you want to leave.
There's speculation that the $6 billion that the Biden administration released for the prisoner exchange recently with Iran was used to finance this attack. Is there any truth to that?
No.
Is there any evidence of that?
No, not one iota. All that $6 billion is still in a bank in Qatar, has not been touched by anybody, hasn't gone anywhere.
Is there a way for us to freeze that money still again?
Well, look, we have always had the option of oversight over that money and making sure we're watching it closely. But I can assure you no single dime of it has been spent, and we are watching very, very closely. And we do have oversight over those funds. And I think it's important to remember two more things. One, the way the arrangement was set up, not by us, but by the Trump administration, is that money can only be used for approved humanitarian purposes. We get to approve that. And it can only be spent by paying vendors that we approve to go purchase those humanitarian goods and then ship them into Iran. So the regime never gets to touch it. And then there's this other question about fungibility. Well, you've alleviated their budgetary constraints by $6 billion, so it allows them to go fund more terrorism. Again, not a shred of truth to that. For one thing, do you think the Iranians were sitting around making choices about, well, should we feed our people or should we buy more weapons? They've never cared about their own people. The reason why the humanitarian funds are needed is because the regime completely neglects their own people. So this idea that we've freed up their choices for them is just not true. And they've been funding terrorism for a long, long time. They are the most heavily sanctioned nation on the planet, or almost.
The 26th Marine Expeditionary Unit was just deployed. The last time that happened, if I'm not mistaken, was during the Iraq War.
I would not read in. I don't know about the deployments of the 26th.
Or mobilized.
I would not read into any military deployments right now from the United States as indicative of any desire by the United States to get involved on the ground. There are no plans, none, to put American boots in combat in Israel on the ground. And you know what? The Israelis don't want that either. They've got a very powerful military. They know how to take care of themselves. What they want and what we're giving them are tools and weapons and capabilities, and that will continue to flow. They just got a package of security assistance just yesterday, more weapons and capabilities, and more will be coming.
So just how dangerous is this situation for the world?
It's
to put it in perspective.
I think it's important to remember that what happens in the Middle East reverberates elsewhere. And obviously, this is not good for the Israeli people. It's not good for security and stability there, and it could have ripple effects on peace and security throughout the region. And we, the American people, benefit from a stable, integrated, cooperative, prosperous Middle East. I mean, everything from how that affects the oil markets to how it affects our own security establishment, where we have to put troops and where we have to put ships. All of that is based on what's going on in the Middle East. I've heard this argument that we somehow have turned a blind eye to the Middle East. We're so focused on Ukraine, we're so focused on China that, we've ignored the Middle East, and it's just not so. Yemen has been experiencing the longest truce in this war ever, for more than 15 months. That has saved countless lives in Yemen because of our diplomacy. We have taken steps to try to move towards Israel and Saudi Arabia to normalize their relations. Now, there's a long way to go, but we've taken steps to do that, and they each have taken positive steps in that direction.
Now, we know that that Hamas unfortunately has taken hostages.
They have.
Including Americans.
They have.
Do we know anything about their whereabouts or how or where they're at?
We know very little. We believe there's a small number of Americans in the hostage pool. We think that number could change over time as we get more information. But that's the hard part. We don't have a lot of information. We don't know where they are. We don't know if they're in one big group or several small groups. We don't know if they're being moved around. We're in touch with family members who are doing, in spite of the grief and sorrow, are providing us as much information as they can about where their loved ones last were. Some of them actually saw them being abducted. So, and we're also in touch with Israeli officials. We've offered them some expertise in hostage recovery. That advice and counsel will continue for as long as they want that. And last thing I know you're running out of time, but
no, trust me, I have all day to speak with you. I know you're busy.
I would just say that we will do everything we need to do, everything we can to get these Americans back to their families where they belong. The less we say about that publicly, probably the better chances we're going to have of success.
We live in a world, now that you mentioned that everyone wants to know. We need to know all the details of everything, especially when transparency in government is important. But when it comes to these topics about intelligence and security and keeping people safe, there's some things that should be kept quiet.
Absolutely, especially when you're talking about a sensitive hostage situation. Because if you're not careful about what you say, you could actually torpedo your success rate. And if you're also not sensitive and careful about what you do, you could place those hostages at greater risk, and nobody wants to see that happen. So we're certainly watching this hour by hour. We're in touch with our Israeli counterparts, and I can assure the families that we will do everything we can, and we're going to be careful about how much we say about that.
You've dealt with a lot of conflicts throughout your tenure in your career. Would you consider this one of the most difficult ones?
I think I would. I mean, obviously it's in the early days here, but this one feels different. Yeah, I mean, I think to put it in perspective, Israel's a small country, and so they have somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 dead. That's just dead, let alone thousands that are wounded and hundreds that are missing. But if you, by ratio, pull that out to a country our size, it's worse just in terms of proportion than the casualties we experienced on 9/11. And we all remember what 9/11 felt like, don't we? It was a gut punch, and it changed the trajectory of American history for the last 20 years. For good or ill, you could argue either way, I get that. Well, for Israel, this is a 9/11 event, and in many ways it's worse for them, just in terms of the proportion of the population that has now been affected by it.
Yet there's people on social media and justifying the attack, celebrating the violence. How does that make you feel? What's your message to people that are celebrating this attack and the violence?
It's repugnant.
On both sides.
Repugnant. Reprehensible. It's just reprehensible. I mean, I don't know how anybody could sign up and be okay with innocent lives being lost. And
what does that tell us about humanity, the state of humanity?
Well, I think it's important also, again, keep it in perspective. Those voices are small. They are few in number. The vast majority of the international community are coming behind Israel, and they understand what the Israelis are going through. And we have a big Jewish community, of course, in the United States. They're suffering. Israel's a small country, but I like to think of Israelis as a big family. I mean, they all know each other, and the Jewish community here is very connected there. And they are all feeling this in a very visceral, personal way. I have many Jewish friends. I've spoken to all of them, and there's not a single one that isn't worried about somebody they know in Israel right now. And I think it's important for all Americans, even if you're not Jewish, even if you have no connection to Israel, to remember that your fellow citizens, your fellow family members are feeling this kind of pain. And they need to know that it's okay to, A, feel the pain, but also it's okay to work, recreate, worship, and know that you can do it in peace and security. That President Biden is working closely with state and local authorities to make sure that we can identify and disrupt any potential threat. We have to take that seriously. Unfortunately, anti-Semitism is on the rise. It's on the rise here at home. It's on the rise around the world.
With that said, and in closing, back at home, a lot of people are politicizing this, and both parties, Democrats and Republicans alike, are using this to their benefit. What would you say to that?
It's not time for politics. It's time for us to stand up as Americans, all of us, no matter who you vote for, no matter where you live, certainly no matter how you worship, and recognize what the Israeli people are going through. And if you need to be reminded, remind yourself of how you felt on 9/11, when all Americans came together. In fact, the whole world came together in support of us, and we all couldn't bear to see the images on TV. We all knew somebody who knew somebody that was impacted by 9/11. Go back to that feeling you had on 9/11 and just remember that is what the Israeli people are feeling right now. And they're human beings. Every single person you see, every image you see, there's a story there. And unfortunately, some of those stories just got cut tragically short in the last couple of days.
Mr. Kirby, thank you for your time. Great speaking to you. Sorry under these horrible circumstances.
Yeah, good to be with you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Truly an honor. Thank you, sir.
No,
Appreciate
good.
you.
Good conversation.